Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is TJ Peyton, and I am the author of the book Semen Secrets. I would like to first thank my soror for inviting me here today. I'm here because thanks to our urologist sharing a little bit about male infertility. My husband and I actually dealt with male infertility. Um, my husband and I got married very young. We were the first in our friend group to get married, and so we wanted to wait to have children. We were in our early 20s, wanted to have fun, travel. So about 5 years in, we decided, okay, now we are ready to start our family. So I had some issues with fibroids in the past, and so I was like, okay, I was prepared for my part of the fertility journey. But my doctor kept saying, oh, you're fine, there's nothing wrong, but we're not getting pregnant. Like, what's happening? So my doctor finally said, well, hey, maybe your husband should get checked. And so my husband's like, hey, now, wait a minute, I'm not going to get checked. What do you mean? I'm a black man. I got a lot, going on. And in our society, that's the picture. Like, I'm the black man. I don't shoot any blanks, is what my husband say. I'm sure you've heard that before. And so he wasn't going. And I said, look, you're going to go. So you either going by force or you just going to go. And I said, don't let me have to get your mama involved, because then you really will have to go. And so he went, and I will never forget the day in 2013. I was working from home. The nurse called, and she said, we didn't find anything. And I thought, like, oh, okay. I knew it wasn't an issue. And she said, no, we didn't find any sperm. And I said, I'm sorry, come again? Like, what do you mean? Like, you didn't find any, like, in the picture? You didn't find any, when you looked? Did you have your glasses on? Are you sure it was my husband? And she said, yeah, we didn't find anything. And then it's like the world stopped. I don't know. I heard her calling my name, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't process. All I kept thinking was, how am I going to tell my husband this? And so I called my husband, and I was like, hey, the doctor called back. He's like, oh, okay, what did they say? And then he said, oh, okay. And that was it. Came home, everything was regular. And so I thought, oh, he's taking this well. And in 24 to 48 hours, it went from here to here. After that, the trajectory of our lives changed because he did not want to tell anyone that he had an issue. And that was hard. He didn't want our parents to know, didn't want anyone to know. And so I was carrying this load in addition to my own load because I wanted to be a mom. Similar to Tanika, I followed the formula. We went to school, got married, and now we're supposed to have a baby. Like, that is the formula. And so when it didn't happen that way, now what? What do we do? And how do we move forward? And I was very much in the beginning, like, I want to have my own baby. So we went to a urologist, and they said, well, you can do this. I don't want a sperm donor. I also watched a lot of Law & Order. So, like, what happens if this person's a serial killer? Then I'm going to have a serial killer baby. So I was like, I want my own baby from my husband. And I also went through this. I want to see what I look like. Like, what do we look like? I mean, the baby could come and not look like any of us, but they should look like somebody. And I went through the process of processing that in addition to also trying to help my husband. Our marriage took, we were divorcing like every other day. We got to a point where sometimes we wanted to have sex, sometimes we didn't. I know I really wanted to have a baby, so sometimes it was like, all right, it's 6 o'clock, it's time to get with it, and 6 o'clock is over, let's wait and see what happens. We Googled ourselves into like oblivion, everything. We looked at every single thing we could, and nothing worked. We went to a urologist. We found a fabulous urologist, Dr. Ronald Anglade, And he worked with us to try to do possible solutions. So all of the medications that were listed, all of the processes that the previous doctor shared, we went through those. The problem is that for insurance, it's already hard to get your infertility covered. For a man, it's non-existent. So our urologist was very crafty in making sure that at least for those medications that my husband needed to kind of diagnose everything, those were covered. Because if not, we would have been spending a lot of money out of pocket. My husband also had a testy to see if they could find sperm, and they found nothing. And so I remember lying on the floor, like in the bathroom, after they told us they couldn't find anything, just like crying. My in-laws were there, but again, I wanted everybody away from me because I can't take on your grief and my grief too. Like, that's not gonna work. After that, again, it was a lot of ups and downs. I was angry. I went through the stages of grief, and it comes back, it goes, it comes back. And I'm a Christian, so I'm like, okay, God is gonna work it out. God is gonna do it. And I was like, after about year 2 or 3, I was like, okay, God, like, what's happening? I know you see me over here. And finally, I became angry at God. And it was hard for me to say that, but I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. I was very angry. Like, me and God weren't friends. And I would hate when people would come to me and say, just pray about it. No, because I'm not talking to God today or tomorrow or next week. I'm not praying about anything. And I think sometimes as a society, we like to say we can pray it away or we can faith it away. It didn't work. So I was like, leave me alone. For my husband, because he didn't want to share with anybody or any of his friends, there was no support. And when you looked in the landscape, there was nobody like me or looking like my husband talking about male infertility. We didn't even know it existed in our friend group. Nobody knew. And so it was very hard to cope. And there was nothing for the wife to tell me, like, how do I help my husband? How do I help myself? And so finally, I talked to my best friend, and I was going on and crying, and she was like, pause. She said, you're going to be mad, but I'm going to ask you a question. Do you want to be pregnant or do you want to be a mom? And so I said, well, you don't understand because you got 2 kids and da-da-da-da. She said, I asked you a question. Do you want to be pregnant or do you want to be a mom? Those are 2 very different things. And so I hung up the phone on her, and she texted me you gonna call me back next week? And I did. I did call her back, and it sat with me. It stuck with me. Like, do I want to be pregnant or do I want to be a mom? So that's when my husband and I said, okay, maybe we need to revisit the story about, what are the other options? So we went back to our urologist, what are some other things we can explore? So of course, sperm donation, again, I was too law and order to even try it. So I'm like, no. There was surrogacy, but again, my husband didn't produce any sperm. We would have to do the donation, and I could very much carry my child. Why am I paying, $50 billion for somebody else to do it? We tried to adopt through the state, and the state has a lot of weird rules about adoption. And believe it or not, we were actually denied for adoption with the state because we have a pool in our backyard, and although our yard is fenced in, because we did not have a pool around, a fence around the actual structure, they told us that we could not adopt. They had the supervisor come out. We had the person that came to our assessment advocate for us to adopt, and they told us no. So we tried the private adoption route, and you would be amazed at what birth mothers ask for. They wanted Uber rides. They wanted, not to the appointments, but oh, I need an Uber ride here to my friend's house, or I need this, I need that. And I'm just like, oh, no, I can't pay you $20,000 to go talk to your homegirl. So that was also an issue. So finally, we just had to take a pause. And my husband and I, again, had been going back and forth, and then you get to your parents and everybody's asking, when are you gonna have a baby? And I never forget, I was in Babies R Us buying baby shower gifts, and on every aisle there was a pregnant lady. I mean, I should have considered that with Babies R Us, but it was aisle 5 through 25. And I never forget, I broke down in the middle of the store, and the lady was like, I know you're so excited about being pregnant, and I just ran out of the store. And so finally, I called my best friend because she was having a baby and I was a godmother. I was like, hey, I can't do it. Like, I can't go to anything else. I can't go to any baby shower. I can't do anything else. I'll send a gift. And the friends who understood, understood, and they gave me grace. The people who didn't, we're not friends anymore. So there you go. But they understood, and she was like, it's fine. You're still the godmother of my children. I understand you can't do this right now, and I don't want to stress you. So that was in 2016, and we went through 2017. And my husband and I continued to try all the options. And so finally, I was saying there was nothing there, and one of my friends said, hey, why don't you create a space for what you don't see? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you should write a book about your story. And I'm a journaler. That's how I got out all my frustrations. I journal because there was nobody I can tell. So that led to the process of me writing a book about my story. And everything in my book was my journal because that's all I had, that's all I knew. And so I entitled the book Semen Secrets because my husband's semen was a secret to the doctors because nobody could tell us why. We did genetic testing, but there was nothing conclusive. And it was also a secret because we really couldn't tell anyone. So fast forward to 2018, my husband and I went to church and started going back, and we finally found a happy medium for us to kind of talk about the issues that we were experiencing. And my husband revealed to me that he thought about taking his own life because he could not give us a child. And that made my world stop. And so I got quiet in my quiet space, and I realized that I was putting a baby I was never promised over a husband I vowed to love. And that was very hard because as a Christian, it's your marriage, then your baby, then your this. And I was so focused on the aspect of trying to get pregnant that I forgot about my best friend. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, what would have happened if you would have done that? Like, I would have not been able to live with myself, and I would not have been a mom. So that made me pause. And so then I went to a sermon at church, and the sermon was When God Says No. And it struck me because I had never dealt with the word no. And I had to go home and I said, no, God, you might be telling me no. And I boohoo cried because I didn't know, maybe he was telling me no. And I just told God, okay, if you're going to tell me no, then what is my purpose? Because I want to be a mom. And so if this is not supposed to be our purpose, if we're not supposed to be parents, then you better figure it out. Now, if I'm supposed to win the lottery, show me the numbers or something, but you have to do something to fill this void in this space, because I do not know if I can live with all of this and everybody else's everything, because society doesn't give you grace all the time. You're going to walk in a space and someone's going to ask you about having a child, and you're going to have to talk about it at some point. You don't owe anybody anything, but after a while, you either are going to blow up or you're just going to be silent, and you can't be either, especially Black families, everybody's nosy. So you're going to go to that family reunion, and a cousin's going to be like, hey, girl, and you're going to be like, leave me alone. So after I got comfortable with saying no, I was trying to finish writing the book, and I said, okay, God, if we're going to have children, it's going to have to be effortless, because at this point, I was tired of trying everything, and I finally said, we're just going to live life. We're not going to let infertility control what we're going to do. And I wanted the ending to the book to be I had a baby. Well, that wasn't happening, and I kept leaving the pages blank. And so finally, I got in my mind, well, maybe I should just put the book out without an ending that says I have a baby. But just putting at the end that I still have hope of being a mom, because not everybody's story ends with a baby. Not everybody's story ends with success. And it's a very real thing that a lot of people don't talk about, because you want that miracle, God bless me, and I could shout and do my dance on the pulpit, but that didn't happen for me. So I finished writing the book, and not even 6 months later, I had a sorority sister call me. She had adopted 2 girls, and she was like, we have a baby. And I thought she was adopting again. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna have 3 kids now. She was like, no. My attorney called, and they said they had a mom that wanted to give up her daughter for adoption. And I told them you would take the baby. And I said, well, I didn't even talk to my husband. She was like, that's okay, that's okay. You know, my husband and I talked to you guys, but I told them we would take it. So you have a baby now, because I told them we would do it. And I was like, okay, well, let me talk it over with my husband. And so, similar to everything else, adoption is expensive because you have to have the money up front. But going through a private adoption rather than going through an adoption agency, just going through an attorney, and also the child was in state, so it made it much cheaper. You know, we had been saving some because we just weren't sure about what was going to happen. And in 2019, we welcomed our daughter. We had her from the hospital, so she was our baby. I will say that adoption comes with its own set of anxieties because in the state of Georgia, they changed the law the year before we had our daughter, but it used to be you had to wait the mom had 10 days to decide if she was going to take the baby back or not. They changed it to 4 days. And I told my husband, I said, we took the baby home. And before that, I will say that there was a room in my house where I wanted my daughter to be. And so in that room, I put, you know, this is where her crib will be. This is where her bookcase will be. This is where her whatever would be, not knowing. I did that 3 years before my daughter ever came. And so it's weird to walk in the room and like see a baby in the crib where I put the sticker that this was going to be the crib. And it was weird to see her toys there. And so the mom still had 4 days. She actually had more than 4 days because the weekends don't count. It's 4 business days. And so I tell my husband, I don't want anybody coming to the house. I don't want my mama to come. Because if we can't keep this baby, it's going to be a problem. And so he, unbeknownst to me, called my mom. He said, you know, you're a new mom. You need your mom. Like, not everybody has their mom when they're a new mom. You do. You need your dad. You need your support system. I could be there. My mom could be there. My dad could be there. But you need your mom. So I was like, okay. And the day came, and it was 5:30, and the attorney called, and my heart stopped. And she said, congratulations, you can keep the baby. And so a funny story is the next day, thank you, we had to take the baby for the checkup. And so my mom was on the phone talking, and I walked in without the baby because she was in the car with my husband. She was like, oh my gosh, you had to give back the baby. I have to call you back, girl. The baby is gone. I was like, Mom, she's in the car. And she was like, oh, okay. So to say all that, to say my family is very dramatic, which is another reason why I had to be a secret. But I say all that to say, now that we are on the other side, I am more open to exploring different options. And through my book, I've been able to reach a lot of couples who really don't want to talk about them not being able to have a child due to male factor infertility. And I also will say my husband still isn't comfortable like going in a group. He doesn't want to be the poster child for male infertility. And so he will only talk about it if you ask. And most people won't ever see him, so they ask when it's really a situation where a guy may be like, hey, I'm thinking about life or death with this situation. So I want to encourage everyone, to all the men out there and who may be watching, go get checked, because you never know, it could be you. As the doctor said, it could be low sperm count. And I also want to encourage all the Christian people out there, it's okay to tell God you're angry. That's honest. And one last thing I will say is a friend of mine had to remind me that even Jesus cried because he didn't want his suffering before he had to go suffer. So if Jesus could cry and say, God, can you kind of pass this cup from me? She's like, who are you? And I thought about that when I thought about my faith to say, okay, it's okay for me to cry and be angry because Jesus did it too. So I want to encourage you all. My book is available online, shameless plug. So you can go to semensecrets.com. I also have some flyers in my purse. And please share widely, especially in the Black community, because we do not talk about male infertility. And I think it's something that if more men talked about and shared, then a lot of us women wouldn't have to go around wondering, is it just us? Or also making the men feel a little bit weird, because my husband used to get upset when people used to think it was me and it was him. So thank you so much for allowing me to share my story, and I'll turn it over to the next person.